FMGS modes: attitude, airspeed, vertical speed, barometric altitude, radio altitude, heading, track. PFD Introduction. The primary flight display provides all primary flight information to the pilots. These displays include flight management and guidance system, FMGS modes, attitude, airspeed, vertical speed, barometric altitude, radio altitude, heading, track, and flight director. Normally, the speed tape, barometric altimeter, and compass display have a gray background. The gray backgrounds display black if an instrument cooling problem occurs. Flight Mode Annunciator. The flight mode annunciations appear in 5 columns at the top of the PFD. Each column is reserved for specific features of the FMGS operations, and there are 3 lines available in each column. We will learn more of the FMA display modes in the flight guidance modules. The attitude indicator displays as a moving background behind black, yellow outlined fixed airplane symbols representing each wing and the nose. The outline dims if the track FPA mode is selected, unless toga or flex modes are engaged. Ground indications. Before we continue with the attitude display, let's describe some indications you will see while on the ground. As soon as one engine is started, the maximum side stick deflection symbols appear as white angles, and the sum of both pilots' side stick orders is displayed as a white target cross. Attitude. The pitch and bank scales are provided as shown. You can click the buttons on this frame to view various pitch and roll displays. When the bank angle exceeds 45 degrees, all PFD symbols except for those shown here will disappear. The displays return to normal when the bank angle decreases below 40 degrees. Flight control protection symbols display in green at plus or minus 67 degrees bank to mark the bank limits. If the bank control protection is lost, amber crosses replace these green symbols. The pitch scale is marked as shown. When the pitch angle exceeds 25 degrees nose up or 13 degrees nose down, all PFD displays except those shown here will disappear. The displays return to normal when pitch angle is less than 22 degrees nose up or 10 degrees nose down. Flight control protection symbols display in green at 30 degrees nose up and 15 degrees nose down to mark the pitch limits. If the pitch control protection is lost, amber crosses replace these green symbols. If the pitch angle exceeds 30 degrees, large red arrowheads indicate excessive attitude and show the direction to move the nose in order to reduce the pitch angle. A yellow trapezoidal side slip index displays the side slip similar to the operation of a slip ball. Optimum performance is achieved with this index centered if thrust is symmetrical. As on any airplane, when the aircraft is in a slip, use of rudder pedals and/or rudder trim can center the index. In the event of engine failure during takeoff or go-around, or if thrust is asymmetrical, the side slip index changes from yellow to blue and it becomes a target indicator to compensate for the asymmetrical thrust to optimize the amount of side slip. Note the detailed pop-up description of when the side slip index becomes a blue target. To turn the Flight Director on or off, use the Flight Director push button on the EFIS control panel. Note, the flight directors or flight path directors must either be both on or both off to ensure proper auto-thrust operation and recognition. Do not operate with only one flight director or flight path director on. Flight Director. There are two Flight Director modes available, each with its own characteristic symbols. The mode is based upon the basic reference selected on the FCU. The more common mode of heading vertical speed displays the Flight Director guidance with green pitch and roll command bars. The other mode of Track FPA displays the green Flight Path Vector and Flight Path Director and is normally called the bird. In the heading vertical speed reference, the pitch and roll bars normally display. However, these bars are not visible at touchdown in the rollout mode. The PFD displays a green yaw bar below 30 feet radio altitude if a localizer signal is available during takeoff, runway mode, and upon landing in flare and rollout mode. The bars flash for 10 seconds and then remain on steady when at the first AP or FD engagement or reversion to heading vertical speed mode, whether automatic reversion or manual, or change of selected flight level when altitude capture mode is engaged, or loss of localizer or glide slope in land mode or loss of land mode. We'll view some of these conditions in this module. In the heading vertical speed reference mode, wing and nose position symbols are displayed, and if the FD push button is selected, the Flight Director will be displayed. Flight Director roll guidance will be commanded by presenting a lateral displacement of a vertical bar. Pitch guidance will be commanded by presenting a vertical displacement of a separate pitch bar. The presentation is with respect to the air mass that the aircraft is flying in. Proper answer of both commands will be when the nose symbol is superimposed on the intersection of the two bars. In the Track FPA reference mode, the flight path vector is displayed, wing and nose position symbols are dimmed, and if the FD push button is selected, the Flight Path Director will be displayed. This frame shows the indications when the aircraft is not drifting and the heading and track are the same. Additionally, the FPV is on the horizon to indicate level flight, although the attitude display shows the pitch is nose up. During a descent, the FPV will move down to indicate the vertical trajectory. This is the flight path angle. We have now added a wind from the right, and the FPV shows a drift to the left. You can see that the FPV is aligned with the track diamond to indicate the drift. FPD roll guidance will be commanded by presenting an angular rotation of the FPD. Pitch guidance will be commanded by presenting a vertical displacement of the FPD. The presentation is with respect to the surface of the Earth. Proper answer of both commands will be when the flight path vector is superimposed on the Flight Path Director FPD. The guidance input to the FD and the FPD is identical. Whether the aircraft is in heading vertical speed reference or track FPA reference, manual flight, side stick input, or auto flight, autopilot input, the EFCS will adjust pitch, pitch rate, roll, and roll rate to respond to the guidance correction commands as long as the commands are followed. Regardless of the mode of guidance or presentation, LS, localizer, GPS, RNAV, heading vertical speed, or track FPA, The corrections will be to maintain the guidance commands by adjusting pitch and roll commands. Only the presentation is different for the flight director and the flight path director. The command symbols indicate the FMGS guidance. The FMGS guidance is provided as either managed guidance or selected guidance. Please read the pop-up definition of these types of FMGS guidance. Airspeed tape. This is the airspeed tape. It moves behind a fixed yellow reference line and triangle. The minimum airspeed display is 30 knots, and only even values of 10 are labeled. Speed commands are either provided as managed speeds by the FMGS as pre-selected through the MCDU, or as selected speeds as selected by the pilot through the Flight Control Unit or FCU. The magenta target triangle appears when the airspeed target is derived from the FMGS. If the target speed is associated with the Econ speed range, a magenta double bar is the target. The blue target triangle appears when a speed selected on the Flight Control Unit is the commanded speed. A speed trend arrow appears during acceleration or deceleration to show the speed that will be reached in 10 seconds based upon current conditions. Therefore, the length of the arrow depends upon the acceleration or deceleration. The arrow only appears when it is greater than 2 knots and disappears when it is less than 1 knot. The arrow also disappears if the FACs are inoperative. Click the buttons on this frame to display various conditions. After you have prepared for flight, the blue V1 and the magenta V2 speed appears as shown. Since these speeds are currently off scale, they appear in digital format only. As you accelerate for takeoff, the V1, VR, and V2 appear along the speed tape as a blue 1 for V1, a small blue circle for VR, and a magenta-colored triangle for V2. The V1 and VR displays will blank after liftoff, but the V2 triangle will remain in view as a reference. Regardless of the V2 speed, the Flight Director pitch command for SRS will be to maintain at least V2 plus 10 knots for a normal takeoff. However, the normal SRS command will also limit the pitch to plus 18 degrees, causing the aircraft to accelerate to a speed greater than V2 plus 10. Note: an active wind shear warning will allow the SRS guidance to increase pitch to plus 22.5 degrees. The SRS guidance will command the aircraft to climb to acceleration altitude, and then the flight director will command a pitch reduction to accelerate the aircraft. If the takeoff was made with flaps 1 plus F, normal takeoff configuration, as the speed tape moves through S speed, the flap should be selected to 0. If the takeoff performance requirements call for config 2 or 3, the flap should be selected to 1 when F speed is reached. After the flaps are selected to config 1, the F blanks and S appears to indicate the minimum speed for slat and flap retraction to provide stall margin protection for config 0. The flap limit speed, VFE, will move to the new limit speed for the config, but will not be displayed until that limit moves into the display range. The visible range of the speed tape is plus or minus 40 knots, so VFE, which is the red and black band at the high end of the speed scale, will not normally be visible except with config 3 during takeoff or go-around. The position of F on the speed scale is a function of gross weight. VFE is fixed and will be visible only at high gross weight or during high accelerated performance after wind shear recovery. After flap slat retraction, the red and black area indicates Vmax. Vmax represents the VMO at 350 knots when operating below 25,000 feet. Vmax represents the MMO of Mach 0.82 when operating above 25,000 feet. As you accelerate, the airspeed trend arrow displays a 10-second projection of the airspeed. The arrow is based on the current acceleration with the present thrust setting and pitch attitude. The arrow presentation is dynamic and will vary with the thrust setting and pitch attitude. The target speed is now 250 knots. The speed target moves to 250 as the aircraft transitions the acceleration altitude and the FMA changes to climb or open climb depending on the mode. The aircraft is now stabilized at the target speed to climb to 10,000 feet. After climbing through 10,000 feet, the FMGS target will automatically adjust as shown here at 300 knots. If the target speed display is off scale, it is displayed in digital format. The green Mach number appears whenever the Mach value is greater than Mach 0.5. A green speed protection symbol indicates the speed at which overspeed protection becomes active. This protection speed is VMO plus 6 knots and MMO plus 0.01. The minimum selectable speed, VLS, is the top of the amber strip. It represents the lowest selectable speed with auto thrust on and provides an appropriate margin to the stall speed. The alpha protection speed is the top of the black and amber strip. It represents the speed corresponding to the minimum angle of attack at which alpha protection becomes active in normal law. The alpha max speed is the top of the solid red strip. It represents the speed corresponding to the maximum angle of attack that the aircraft can attain in pitch normal law. Both the alpha protection speed and the alpha max speeds display only in pitch normal law. If the flight control mode is operating in pitch alternate law or pitch direct law, the VLS is available along with a stall warning speed, VSW. The VSW is the top of a red and black strip. It is the speed corresponding to the stall warning. Note: the VSW information is inhibited from touchdown until 5 seconds after liftoff. The best lift-over drag LD max speed displays as a small green circle, green dot, when in a clean configuration. It also is the engine-out operating speed in a clean configuration. Normally, your target speed will be managed by the FMGS. During econ or auto speed descent, the target speed is displayed as a magenta double bar bracketed by a speed range. The speed range is a split triangle that will display upper and lower speed margins at plus or minus 20 knots from the target speed. The FMGS will allow the airspeed to vary within that range, so the aircraft will both maintain the engine thrust at idle and on the descent profile as the actual wind varies from the FMGS forecast winds. Limitations of the speed range. The upper margin will decrease to plus 5 knots if a speed limit or constraint is active. The upper margin is limited to the lowest speed of Vmax, VMO minus 3 knots, or MMO minus 0.006. The lower margin is limited to the highest speed of green dot, S, F, or VLS. When the aircraft is in a position for approach with the speed managed, the approach phase is activated. The aircraft will slow to green dot speed, and the speed target will move off scale to V approach. You will see a double amber bar symbol on the speed tape at the maximum speed for the next further extended flat position, VFE next, if the aircraft is below 15,000 feet. When the airspeed is at green dot, it will be below VFE next, or 230 knots. Call for flaps 1. Now the display is Vmax 230 knots, VFE next, or 200 knots, and S. Flaps 1 is selected, the aircraft will slow to S. When the airspeed is at S, it will be below VFE next, 200 knots. Call for flaps 2. Now the display is Vmax or 200 knots, VFE next or 185 knots, and F. Flaps 2 is selected, the aircraft will slow to F. Normally the landing gear is selected down after flaps 2. There is no PFD change. When the airspeed maintains F, it will be below VFE next or 185 knots. Call for flaps 3. Now the display is Vmax or 185 knots and VFE next or 177 knots. Flaps 3 is selected. The aircraft will maintain F. When the airspeed maintains F, it will be below VFE next or 177 knots. Call for flaps full. Now the display is Vmax or 177 knots, and there is no VFE next symbol. Flaps full is selected. The aircraft will maintain the approach. Notice that Vmax and VFE next are constants that are a function of the configuration selected. Green dot, S speed, and F speed are a function of the selected configuration and vary directly with present aircraft gross weight. Only one of these symbols is present with each flap handle selection as follows. Flap handle 0, green dot. Flap handle 1, S. Flap handle 2, F. Flap handle 3, F. Same speed as flap handle 2. With the flap handle at full, only the V approach symbol appears. The V approach symbol is a function of present aircraft gross weight and wind. If it is off scale, it is represented in digital format in the lower speed scale margin. After landing, the target speeds disappear, but the speed trend arrow remains in view during the deceleration. The barometric altimeter is displayed as a white moving scale with gray background and a green digital readout. If the altitude display is negative, the abbreviation NEG is displayed in white. When you are in flight, the yellow altitude window displays amber if the aircraft deviates from the FCU selected altitude. Additionally, the green digital readout displays as amber on an approach when you have selected an MDA or MDH. This change from green to amber occurs as the aircraft goes below the selected MDA or MDH. The target altitude symbol appears in blue when it represents the FCU selected altitude, or magenta when it represents an altitude constraint in the FMGC vertical managed mode. When the target altitude is within the altimeter scale, it displays with its numerical value. When the target altitude is off the altimeter scale, the numerical value displays above or below the altimeter scale. The barometric reference displays either STD for standard or QNH. When QNH is displayed, the numerical setting of hectopascals or inches of mercury is the setting reference. The barometric reference is set to standard by pulling the standard knob on the EFIS control panel. It is set to QNH by pushing the same knob. The barometric reference display will pulse if the pilot has not selected standard above the transition altitude during climb, or if standard remains selected during descent below the transition level, or 2,500 feet radio altitude if transition level is not available. Upon reaching the top of descent and down to the final approach guidance, glide slope or approach nav, a magenta vertical deviation VDEV symbol is displayed. This symbol indicates the aircraft vertical position in relation to the FMGC desired vertical profile. The symbol range is plus or minus 500 feet and can be referenced to the barometric altitude scale. If V deviation is above 500 feet, the symbol displays at the range limit, and the actual V deviation value can be found on the progress page of the MCDU. Radio altimeter. The radio height display appears when the aircraft is at or below 2,500 feet AGL. It displays in 10-foot increments down to 50 feet, then in 5-foot increments down to 10 feet, then in 1-foot increments. With the decision height entered on the MCDU approach page, the radio height displays green when the aircraft is 100 feet above the selected decision height and displays in amber below this altitude. Upon reaching the selected decision height, the decision height letters flash amber for 3 seconds, then display steady amber over the radio height display. If no decision height is entered or both FMGCs fail, the radio height appears in green down to 400 feet and in amber below 400 feet. A blue landing elevation bar displays on the barometric altimeter to show the landing elevation at the flight planned destination. This bar displays during flight phases 7 and 8 as long as the QNH altimeter reference mode is selected. Reference the flight phase chart shown here. A red ribbon ground reference displays on the right side of the barometric altimeter scale. The ribbon is driven by the radio altimeter signal and displays below 570 feet. When the aircraft is on the ground reference ribbon is at the middle of the altitude window. Vertical speed. The vertical speed is normally displayed with a green pointer and in a green digital format. However, the digital format only displays when the vertical speed is more than 200 feet per minute. When the aircraft is above 2,500 feet, the displays are amber if the vertical speed exceeds 6,000 feet per minute. When the aircraft is above 1,000 feet and below 2,500 feet, the displays are amber if the vertical speed exceeds 2,000 feet per minute. When the aircraft is below 1,000 feet, the displays are amber if the vertical speed exceeds 1,200 feet per minute. Heading. Magnetic heading is displayed with a white scale on a gray background. The display is a heading-up display with a fixed yellow reference line at the magnetic heading. Note, TRU can appear when operating outside the normal latitudes. A blue pointer indicates the selected heading or track value that is selected on the FCU heading track window. If the selected value is off scale, the digits appear on the appropriate side of the scale. If the FD push button switches off, a second heading or track symbol appears on the attitude horizon line, and heading markers are displayed every 10 degrees on the horizon line. The aircraft track is displayed with a small green diamond. Therefore, the drift angle can easily be determined by comparing the heading to the displayed track diamond. ILS guidance. Pressing the ILS push button on the EFIS control panel displays the ILS deviation scales. If valid localizer and glide slope signals are received, the deviation indexes will also appear. If a deviation index is off scale, only half of the symbol appears at the edge of the scale. With the ILS push button selected and an ILS frequency and course selected, the ILS station identifier, ILS frequency, and DME, if available, is displayed as shown. A magenta ILS front course pointer appears as a dagger-shaped symbol on the heading scale. The ILS course appears on the side with magenta numerals if it is off scale. With the aircraft above 100 feet radio altitude, if the glide slope deviation exceeds 1 dot for 2 seconds, the glide slope scale flashes. A 1 dot deviation on the glide slope represents plus or minus 0.4 degrees. With the aircraft above 15 feet radio altitude, if the localizer deviation exceeds 1/4 dot for 2 seconds, the localizer scale flashes. A 1 dot deviation on the localizer represents plus or minus 0.8 degrees. If the ILS display is not selected when the approach mode is armed, a flashing ILS message will flash amber. This display shows the aircraft in stable flight on the localizer and glide slope. The heading and track are displayed with the front course symbol beneath the track diamond. The track diamond provides an excellent tool for tracking the localizer when crosswinds exist. Marker indications. The marker indications appear on the PFD as shown. OM appears in blue when the aircraft is over the outer marker. MM appears in amber when the aircraft is over the middle marker. AWY appears in white when the aircraft is over an airways marker beacon or the ILS inner marker. Altitude alert. The Flight Warning Computer, FWC, provides aural and visual warning when the aircraft arrives at a pre-selected altitude or when it deviates from the selected altitude. The warning is a result of comparing the ADIRES altitude to the pre-selected FCU altitude. When the aircraft arrives within 750 feet of the selected altitude, a 1.5-second C-chord aural warning is given, inhibited with autopilot on. The normal yellow altitude window changes to a pulsing yellow and continues to pulse until within 250 feet of the selected altitude. While the aircraft is within 250 feet of the selected altitude, the altitude window is steady yellow. If the aircraft deviates from the selected altitude by more than 250 feet, the altitude window flashes amber and a continuous aural warning is provided. If the aircraft returns to within 250 feet of the selected altitude, the altitude window returns to steady yellow. The pilot can cancel the altitude alerts by selection of a new altitude or pressing the emergency cancel push button on the ECAM control panel, or by pressing either master warning push button. Finally, the altitude alert feature is inhibited in the following conditions. Slats are out with landing gear selected down, or on approach after glide slope has been captured, or when the landing gear is locked down. To complete our description of the PFD, this frame shows the various flags and messages that can be displayed on the PFD. You can click on any flag or message on this screen to read a description of each item. Next, to answer some questions.